On the internet, it's $25, but we can give them out for $15. So if you're interested in purchasing one, it's a fun read. It's kind of like I like to do my classes. Enjoy it, have a real dialogue going on. So in case, did anybody have any questions from last time with that kind of big picture about marriage and revelation and the like? Don't remember anything, right?
We couldn't make it, so we have to redo ours.
Well, you'll get
We're
it.
behind.
You'll get it in February, so that's okay. Well, this week is my portion is on Christian morality. It's a summary of Christian morality, because next week we'll do morality with regard to human sexuality and marriage. It's focused on marriage, but it's good for us to get an idea of morality in general, because we're living in a society today that kind of looks down on morality. It looks at you, say, oh, you 10 Commandments and everything, all these restrictions on us. We want to have freedom to be able to fulfill ourselves, and all you're doing is, say we can't do this, can't do that. You basically say you just can't have any fun. So, that's what they see Christian morality is all about. And I think this is something we have to be able to address. Even the popes in recent years, beginning with Pius XII and John Paul II, has certainly put a good emphasis on this too, and Benedict XVI and Pope Francis. They say basically the sin of our era, of our age, is the lack of the sense of sin. So that nothing is a sin anymore. If I don't, people say, well, if I don't hurt anybody, how can it be a sin? Or if it's done in the privacy of my own bedroom, how can it be a sin? Or if it's between two consenting adults, how can it be a sin? I don't know, anybody hear those kinds of arguments before? And so, how do we respond to that? And I think it's very good for us to understand the response, because if we don't, then we get sucked into it as well. And we don't want that to happen. So it's really important for us to try to have an understanding of Christian morality. I like to give an example of how this comes. It's just the third commandment. Anybody knows the third commandment? Thou shalt keep holy the Lord's day. Sounds familiar? He says, oh yeah, you Catholics have to go to Mass every Sunday. What kind of sin do you commit if you miss Mass on Sunday? Who said mortal sin? Mortal sin? How could it be a mortal sin? I don't hurt anybody. This is typically something that might come up when you have children. You get a child, your son, or daughter, but let's say a son gets to be about 12 years old, and mom comes to wake him up in the morning on Sunday morning, say, hey, come on, Junior, we're going to Mass. And Junior says, I'm tired. I stayed up late last night playing video games. I'm just going to stay home and get caught up on my sleep. Mom says, no, you got to go to Mass. Church says we got to go to Mass every Sunday. But I don't get anything out of Mass. I find Mass kind of boring. The priest always preaches on these topics that have nothing to do with anything that's going on in my life. He even cracks these corny jokes that nobody laughs at. And then they play that old-fashioned music from the 70s. I could pray better at home. What's Junior doing? Doing a cost-benefit analysis, right? What is it going to cost me to get up, get dressed, and go to church? And what's the benefit? If the costs outweigh the benefits, you don't do it, right? The benefits outweigh the costs, you do it. It's going to be a good businessman, you can tell. But that doesn't satisfy mom, you know. Mom says, no, you got to go to Mass. Church says we got to go to Mass every Sunday. If we miss Mass on Sunday, we commit a mortal sin. A mortal sin? You mean missing Mass is like shooting my little sister? No, it's not the same, Mom says, but still, you got to go to Mass. And this goes back and forth until Mom uses the argument that ends all arguments. Exactly. And Junior gets up and goes to Mass, right? But is he a happy camper? No. He's thinking this is just some arbitrary rule that people in power impose upon us in order to control our lives. Maybe all the commandments are just that. Artificial, arbitrary commandments, arbitrary rules that people in power use to control us. He's about ready to throw out all morality, right? So how do we respond to Junior in order to help him to see why it's important for him to go to Mass? You guys, you're going to have kids pretty soon, you know. This is not that far down the road. So if I'm leading the discussion, I always put it in terms of a relationship that he can understand. So if I'm talking to Junior, I'll turn to him and ask him, Junior, do you have a girlfriend? And if he says no, he says, well, pretend like you do. Okay? And you and your girlfriend, your girlfriend comes up to you one day and says, hey, Junior, you and I, we have this great relationship together. You love me a lot. I love you a lot. We have something special that other couples don't have. But let's face it, you are, a very busy guy. You got all these extracurricular activities going on in your life and after school job and sports and, lots of homework and all these other things. And I'm a very busy girl. So why don't we just plan on seeing each other once a month or so? How would Junior respond to that? Would he be okay with that? Why not? She says she loves him. She says she can't imagine her life without him. That he's the greatest thing that ever happened to her. But what's her action saying? He's not that important to her. Her extracurricular activities are more important than being with him. Her hanging out with her other friends are more important than hanging out with him. Maybe her sleeping in on Sunday morning is more important than being with him. And if Junior were smart, what would he do? What would he do? He's history. She's history. Forget her. Why? Because it killed the relationship. Her attitude towards spending time together killed the relationship. And what happens to God, our relationship with God, if we don't take going to Mass seriously? We're basically saying, God, my sleeping in is more important than being with you. Or my watching football is more important than being with you. Or my doing all these other things are more important than being with you. And it could kill our relationship. Well, that's why we call it a mortal sin, because it kills our relationship with God. And so something that simple communicates a message to God. And that message is what makes something a sin. It's not how much what we do in terms of cost and benefit, but what do we say by our actions? So it's very important to kind of approach morality in this more, personal, relational way. And then all of the commandments suddenly make a lot more sense. For example, we covered this kind of last week, I believe, right? What's the first commandment? Yeah, I'm the Lord your God. You should have no other God before me. Is God being exclusive here? Is he saying other religions are not of any value? Is he? Well, again, put things in terms of relationship. What is God saying by that? Is there any relationship that's exclusive? Marriage. I mean, you're not okay with your wife, having another guy over while you're out of town? And no, okay. Well, God is the same way, right? That's the way he is with us, because of the kind of relationship that he's calling us into is so personal, so intimate, that for us to worship another God would be infidelity, adultery, or as the Bible likes to say, harlotry. So, very good to understand that. What's the second commandment? Is God sensitive or what? What's the big deal? It's only a name. Does that sound familiar? Why is that such a big deal, taking the name of God in vain? Well, we have to understand, what does it mean to know someone's name? I mean, imagine this. Let's suppose, wishful thinking, that the Bears were in the playoffs, and you're going to Soldier Field and you're going down to your seat and you hear someone shout out your name, "Hey, Joe!" What does that mean when you hear your name? But you could say, "Look, watch out, look over here." No, they say your name. Somebody recognizes you. Somebody knows you. Someone's there that has a relationship with you. To know someone's name means you have a relationship with that person. God revealed his name to Moses and to the people of Israel. And that name was sacred. But he was saying, Yahweh, I am who am. Therefore, when you go to Egypt and tell the people who sent you, say, I am sent you. That's my name. What does it mean? That this God who's sending me to you has a relationship with you. And so that's what the name signifies, yes, the person, but knowing that name means a relationship. So if you take someone's name in vain, what does that mean? Imagine you're back in grade school and little Susie comes up to you and starts making fun of you, in front of your name. What did that mean? Does she value her relationship with you? No. She's basically, I despise my relationship. I wish I didn't have a relationship with you. It could actually kill your relationship, right? If you tried to recover something like that, you'd be kind of foolish, I think. Well, that's why the name is so important. I mean, imagine you are married and, you know, you guys are working on some project and something, and you actually hit your thumb with the hammer and you shout out your wife's name. Oh, Susie! Would that deepen your relationship? No. I mean, would you throw them out of the house because of that? Probably not. So it probably wouldn't kill the relationship, but it doesn't improve it, does it? The same thing with our relationship with God. When you're playing basketball and you take a shot and you miss, and you say, oh, Jesus. What's that saying? You're basically blaming Jesus for missing the shot, right? Jesus, if you wouldn't have moved that basket, that ball would have gone in, I'm sure of it. It doesn't improve your relationship. Now, that's normally not a mortal sin, okay? But there are ways of using God's name that could be a mortal sin, that could kill our relationship. And that's why that second commandment is there, because of putting things in terms of relationship. And suddenly it takes on different meaning. We covered the third commandment, right? Okay. What's the fourth commandment? Very good. Honor your father and mother. When we say honor our father and mother, what does that mean? What does it mean to honor? It means to love. It means to respect. It means to obey to a certain extent. Children are called to obey their parents until they're out of the house, basically. And if their parents say, no, you can't leave the house, well, and you're 25, that's, you have the right to leave the house. I mean, okay, if you're 45, even more so. But there's always respect, always that. John Paul II also, in his letter to the families, which is a document I recommend to all of you, it's an extremely beautiful document on the family, and he covers the fourth commandment in that document, and he focuses more on parents honoring their children so that they would merit their children's honor. Well, what does it mean to honor your children? It means to love them, right? It means to treat them like a person. Treat them with respect and treasure them. I oftentimes say this to parents, and sometimes they get freaked out a little bit about it. Says, but, I'd say, don't have expectations of your children. Why? Expectations are great for machines. I mean, you go to your car, you turn the key, what do you expect? Yeah, and if it doesn't turn on, what do? You get a little upset, maybe? But after you calm down, what do? Call the mechanic, maybe, have the car towed to the mechanic, and the mechanic tells you, he does all these tests and finds out that the engine is shot and it's not worth repairing. What do you do then? Then you get upset, but then what do? Yeah, you junk that car and get a new one, right? Well, that's fine with machines. You can't do that with a person. Although our society says you can. Gee, if your spouse doesn't meet your expectations, just dump him, divorce him, and get a new one. No, you can't do that. But that's the way we have, this attitude. We treat people like with expectations. Employers do it all the time. But we can't do that in family. So he said, well, gee, you ask a kid to do something, take out the garbage, you expect them to take out the garbage, right? No. Okay? let's suppose you expect him to take out the garbage, okay? You ask Junior, Junior, want you to take out the garbage. And Junior doesn't take out the garbage. What's your reaction? Keep nagging him, right? And if he still doesn't take out the garbage, what do you end up doing? Blowing your top, getting angry, and maybe he does take out the garbage finally, but it's under duress. It doesn't really produce a lot of, you spend a lot more energy trying to get him to take out the garbage than it would have been for you to go and take out the garbage yourself, right? It doesn't work very well. Well, let's suppose you have expectations, you ask Junior to take out the garbage, and he actually takes out the garbage. What's your response to that? You expected him to do it, right? So he comes back in and he says, Mom or Dad, don't you appreciate what I just did? I freely chose to get up from the TV and go to the kitchen, take the garbage out, and you don't even thank me? I mean, when you go to your car and you turn the key and it starts, what do? You jump out and say, yes, it started, mwah, and then get back in and drive off, right? Is that what you do? No, because it's a machine. It did what it's supposed to do. And if you treat children that way, or any human being that way, they say, wait a minute, I freely chose to do this, and you don't even acknowledge that. So expectations is not a way to honor someone. You don't treat them like a person. So how do we deal with this? So you ask Junior to take out the garbage, but don't expect him to take it out. And if he does, and you don't expect it, what's your reaction? Wow, you freely chose to get up from the TV and go to the kitchen and take the garbage out? That's amazing. I mean, that's awesome. Thank you. I mean, maybe you don't quite say it that way, but they can see it on your face. And they feel good inside, don't they? Say, I'm going to want to do that again. And that's the difference between expectations and not having expectations, honoring them as a person. The problem is, what do you do when you don't expect them to, you ask them to do something and you don't expect them to do it and they don't do it? Just consequences. Okay. You lose your privilege for TV for the next 24 hours, sorry. But you don't get upset, do you? You just dish out the consequence. And they're saying, why am I suffering so much? Mom's not even mad. Right now they think, if mom's mad, I suffer, But mom's not, I'm suffering and mom's not even mad. Maybe it has something to do with what I did or didn't do. And so they start thinking about the whole response to being. So this is honoring the person. You're treating them like a human being. Free will. And yet you're fulfilling your responsibility as a parent to guide and direct and give consequences when necessary so that they will learn and develop. Very different way of looking at the fourth commandment, isn't it? But I think it's very important that we see it in this way, very personal and relational way. Okay, fifth commandment. Thou shalt not kill. So what did Jesus say about this commandment? You guys don't remember? Sermon on the Mountain. Everybody remembers the Beatitudes. In fact, that's one of the optional gospels for the marriage ceremony. for the wet mass. But this part, this whole Sermon on the Mountain is quite long, and it explains the Beatitudes in quite a bit detail. And it says, "You have heard it said of the ancients, 'Thou shalt not kill,' and whoever kills shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you, anyone that is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council. Whoever says you fool shall be liable to the hell of fire." How many of you have ever gotten angry at someone? Nobody? How many of you have ever called someone names like fool or something worse? You sure you're liable to the hell of fire? Why? Why would Jesus say this? Is he exaggerating? Someone's saying, I hope so. He's not. He's not exaggerating. It is important to understand what he's saying here, though. But why is he saying that? If you get angry at someone a lot, what happens? You have a warm, fuzzy relationship? No, they could end up hating you, right? If someone calls you names or something like that, makes you feel like dirt, you could end up hating them, couldn't you? And so, what's God going to do if, you do a lot of good things, you make a lot of money, and you give a lot of money to the church and things like that, and and you die and you go before Peter or our Lord in the judgment seat and say, Lord, will you let me into heaven? I've done all these good things honoring you. And he's about ready to let you into heaven, and this other person who you've gotten angry at and called names hates your guts and says, Lord, if you let him into heaven, I'm not going. I can't stand him. What is our Lord going to do? If he lets you into heaven, this person's not going to go. If he takes that person into heaven, you can't go. So, what is he going to do? Well, that's the hell of fire is actually purgatory. Just to give you a little of, and this is what our Lord says. So, if you're offering your gift at the altar of God in heaven, and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. Be reconciled with your brother. Lest he hand you, and then come offer your gift. Make friends quickly with your accuser while you're going with him to court. Lest he hand you over to the judge, and the judge hand you over to the guard, and you be put in prison. I tell you, you won't get out until you've paid the last penny. Again, this is the description that the church has always attached to purgatory. So he's saying, you got to make up before you can enter into heaven. And that's what purgatory is meant to be, a place of purifying our relationships that we've seriously damaged here on this earth. But notice he doesn't say just murder. He says getting angry, losing our temper, calling people names, anything that kills relationships will keep us from going straight to heaven when we die. It's a different way to look at the fifth commandment, isn't it? So, but when you turn in, you understand the relationality part of it, it makes a lot more sense, right? Okay, sixth commandment. You know. That's the 9th, but it's thou shalt not commit adultery. We're going to hold off on those 2 commandments. That's the 6th and the 9th for next week, okay? We'll just unpack that a little bit because that's so important and it is connected with marriage in a very intimate way. Okay, 7th commandment. Thou shalt not steal. You shall not steal. So, and that's connected with the 10th commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. And oftentimes, these are things that are, you know, how important it is to recognize that, you know, our materiality is connected to us, our humanity. How many of you have ever had something stolen from you? How did you feel afterwards? You remember? Nobody remembers? What is angry, frustrated? I mean, it might not have been of that much value. Even if it was of value, you know, it's just a material thing. I mean, if you lost it or it got damaged in an accident or something, yeah, you'd be upset, but you almost feel like you were violated, don't you? Because that's the way we are as human beings. That someone would take something that's part of us away from us. And so how important it is for us to have that respect. And as parents, it's very important to learn how to teach this to your children. Because children get attached to material things. Very simple material things, very much. And a lot of fights go over this. I mean, typical thing is little junior, 3 years old, is playing with a truck and having the greatest time. And his brother or sister sees it and just gets jealous that he's having so much fun, you know? And he says, no, it's my toy, or it's my turn to play. And they end up fighting over it, right? Until it breaks. But what are they communicating to each other by that action? Fighting over a toy. What does that say? This toy is more important than you are to me. And so already at such a young age, children are learning things are more important than people. And unfortunately, people grow up and be adults that way. This is why I always recommend to parents, don't buy toys that kids can play by themselves. Okay? You know, get them baseball and a mitt, or a couple mitts, you know. You know, nobody's going to play baseball by themselves, right? You know, it gets, yeah, you would be, but it gets kind of boring, you know. You can shoot tennis balls off a wall or something like that, you know, but that gets kind of boring after a while too. I could never do that. I mean, I do it for a few minutes and they said, this is ridiculous. But get toys that they can share. Don't use computer games unless they can be played with someone else. You know, preferably in the same room so that they're interacting. And that toys are not things that we fight over. But just to realize the message behind it. And adults do the same thing, by the way. I remember I was driving along in, this is Marin County, California, and coming to a stoplight, and it turns yellow. I slow down to stop, and there was 2 cars in the left-hand turn lane, and the car in the front started to go, you know, use the yellow to turn left, and then stopped and said he was going to wait. And the car behind him thought he was going to go, and what happened? Hit bumpers. No big deal. Bumpers worked. Guy in the front car got out, looked at his car and saw there was no damage. I was right alongside, I could see it. But he was furious. He was angry that this guy had bumped his car. And then he went to the driver's side of the car behind him and started yelling and screaming and pounding on the top of his roof. All over a car that wasn't even damaged. And fortunately, the light turned green and people started honking their horns. Come on, move. Who knows what would have happened, But all over a car that wasn't even damaged. We put so much importance to material things. We have to learn to have that distance from it. I remember seeing a Southern California version of this. It was a little bit different, but it was getting off the freeway. This is in Ventura County. And after you get off, you come to a stoplight. And these two were in the left-hand lane. And it was a car and a truck right behind them. And the guy in the truck was really angry. I think the guy in the car cut him off going off the freeway. I didn't see it, but you got to sense something like that happen. And the guy was really yelling and screaming at the guy in the car in the front, and then reached into his sunroof and started pulling the guy out of the car. Fortunately, he had his seatbelt on. But all over a silly little car that wasn't even damaged. He had his girlfriend right next to him too, and she was screaming. It was really a scene. But these are things we got to realize. Material things, they have their place, but we have to have a detachment from them. How important it is. Our Lord says a lot about it in the Sermon on the Mountain. So if you want to read it, it's a great. It's three chapters. 5, 6, and 7 in there, and a good portion is on this commandment. Okay, the 8th commandment. You got it. Thou shalt not bear false witness. In other words, how important it is for us to witness to the truth and not lie. It's fun with, this is one that comes up with kids all the time, And I always like to ask them, why is it a sin to lie? They always say, because it's one of the commandments. Well, why did God make it one of the commandments? And it's really hard for them to understand, right? And I always like to say, who is the father of lies? Satan, that's one of his names, right? Father of lies. And who's the father of the truth? God the Father, right? Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. He's the truth. So God the Father is the father of the truth. So when we lie, what does that make us? Child of God or child of the devil? You want to be a child of the devil? That's why it's important to tell the truth, right? Even what happened to Jesus when he told the truth? He got nailed to the cross, right? Because he told the truth that he was the Son of God. How important it is for us to realize sometimes telling the truth, we're going to suffer. But it is important to tell the truth. Can you trust someone that lies? No. And even if they get away with it once or twice, you find out, right? You can't trust that person. Can you have a relationship with someone you can't trust? No. That's why it's important for you as couples to have transparency with each other, to tell the truth. And sometimes that's not easy. because you know he's going to freak out or she's going to freak out if I tell him what happened. But if they get a sense that you are lying, pulling the why, hiding something, then it destroys the trust. And even if they're still with you, they're not really with you with their heart and their soul. And how important it is to have that transparency. And that's why our Lord says, thou shalt not bear false witness. Again, it's about relationship and how important it is. Anyway, that's a brief overview of the 10 Commandments, -2, that we're going to cover next week. Any particular questions? Because when we talk about morality, people always have questions. Sometimes people say, I have to go to confession now, Father. And we have actually some good examination of conscience in the church if you want to use them for your to make a good confession, which is always good. We recommend frequent confessions here. So, but anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, why don't we take a little break then, and I'll go upstairs and see if I can find some books.
Also, I had in these courses, but I'm going to talk about it from a human standpoint right now. Okay, what the family is all about, what it means. Oh, good. And
These are
speaking
free
of that,
for each couple, if you want. Marriage.
good.
These, you want to, you can pay for online. You just do a donation to the parish. Okay. All right.
Right. Thanks, Father. So family is what really you're in the process of creating and forming here. And that is not a little thing. It's kind of an amazing thing when you really think about it, because family starts with the love of a man and woman. That's the whole thing. Two people see each other. They like each other. They love each other. Then all of a sudden they say, you know what? I want to be with you always. I want to be with you forever. And then what happens is when they get married, they start they have a bond to start off with, and they form a whole new unit. It's no longer all about me. This kind of bond and commitment is, and you're going to hear this a lot in these courses, it's about us. Family is an us, the sense that we are not just isolated people in an arrangement. Okay. Instead, it's that we are in this thing together. We stick together. We belong to each other. And the whole thing is, and then it goes out. You know, the couple, this new family, enters the world, goes out into the world and sets up its own domicile. Okay. And in that domicile now, they're interacting with the world. And again, they're interacting along with somebody else. And it's the most natural thing in the world when a man and a woman love each other. If they don't put any blockage on that, if it takes its natural course, the man and the woman are going to be pretty soon man and woman and baby. Okay, there's going to be more. There's going to be a natural offspring, a creation that came from this love, which that creation, that infant, that child, is part of the family. And you know, that's a fascinating thing, because when you break it down, take it in slow motion. You start off sharing a life together, and that sharing of that life all of a sudden creates another life that also shares in your life, comes from that life. It's got your DNA. It's got your partner's DNA, your spouse's DNA. And that life now is part of the family. And that is a gigantic bond. There's nothing really closer than that. When we look at our children, when you look at your children, when you have them, if you have them, look at them now, you can see something of the beloved and of yourself in each of those children in a different way, different combinations, but yet they are indeed flesh of your flesh, blood of your blood. They are there because you were there. And all of you are bound together, not just by virtue of a convention, by virtue of a certificate you got over at City Hall. It's because of you and because of your love. Children actually have your life, they share your life, and they receive your life. They've received your life and your love. The bedrock that the family is meant to be built upon, okay, is Father John was talking about the relationship. To me, okay, being an Italian, relationship is too thin for me. Okay, I like romance. Okay, romance is a lot more. Okay, the romance, the love that you have for each other. I have a relationship with a desk in a certain way. Okay, but I have a romance, I think, with my wife. Okay, and that is that beats desk. I'll tell you a little, Father John. I'll tell you a little story about that. One time, a rabbi and a priest were friends, and the priest said, Rabbi, we've been friends for a long time. I've been curious about something. He said, well, what's that? What's that, Bob? He said, well, did you ever eat pork? He said, well, let me ask you. I'll answer your question if you answer a question for me. And he said, what's that? He said, well, I'm going to ask you, Father, did you ever kiss a girl? And the priest kind of hesitated around, and the rabbi said, beats pork, doesn't it? Again, a romance goes a lot more, okay, than just a relationship with a thing, I think. But it's meant to be the means by which, in that family, that loving romance, that self-gift that we've given to each other, that husband and wife give to each other, that's the context in which a child is meant to be grown and born and developed. And this is where you learn, really in the family, whether you like it or not, you learn all sorts of things. It's a natural teacher. It's meant to be the best teacher. Now, I've got some excerpts for you there that they passed out from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Okay, the Catechism of the Catholic Church is between two covers, the teachings of the Catholic Church, what they really are. Sometimes you can hear somebody on TV say, well, the Catholic Church says this, but he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Or even sometimes, wildcat, cleric of some kind says, oh, I think the church's teaching ought to be this. Okay. Well, they're making it up sometimes, and you can't really make it up in the Catholic Church. You pass on what's been handed on to us, pass on we came from the beginning. And the church, back in the 80s, said, let's put it all together. So if anybody has a question about it, if they want to find out anything from scapulars to commandments to sacraments, where, what the church really believes, what the church really teaches about this, there's a place where they can go look at it. It's in the Catechism. In preparing for this talk, what I did was look up some of the things that they said about the family. And it's really pretty neat. And I made some of it in red. Here's some things I want to share with you. He says, thus the home, in the Catechism, is the first school of Christian life and a school for human enrichment. Here one learns endurance and the joy of work, fraternal love, generous, even repeated, forgiveness, and above all, divine worship and prayer and the offering of one's life. These are way more important than what the numerical equivalent of pi is, 3.1416 or whatever it is, okay? I mean, yes, that's an important thing, but this is more important. And I had the privilege, the good fortune of going to two different Ivy League schools, one for college and one for law school. And I had some, fabulous, famous professors that were involved, people you've seen on TV. I took courses from some of them. But let me tell you this. I learned more valuable for my life, for real, like for where I ought to be going, what I ought to be like, and what I ought to do from my family than I did from all the professors at Harvard or Princeton, okay? And it's interesting, one of the persons I learned the most from had the equivalent of about a 4th grade education in Italy, my Italian grandmother. I still think back of all the things, the wisdom that she had, that she passed on just sort of naturally to us by virtue of her experience. And because her life was such that it reflected the wisdom and faith, actually, all the religion comes from this grandmother, that we acquired thanks to her. I still think back on it, and now I'm passing it on. I'm telling some of my kids, who are newlyweds, and one of my sons just got married this last July. Some of the things that I learned back when I was knee-high to a grasshopper and learned from my Italian grandmother. Here's another one. Take a look at in 2202. It says, a man and a woman united in marriage together with their children form a family. This institution is prior to any recognition by public authority, which has an obligation to recognize it. It should be considered the normal reference point by which different forms of family relationship are to be evaluated. So before the United States, before the Roman Empire, before the Egyptian Empire, okay, there was the family. The family existed. This natural thing where people come together and face the world together, are committed to each other, is the way things are meant to be. And it's interesting that the Catholic social teaching is a wonderful, amazing body of great wisdom developed over 2,000 years. Unlike the standard thing that has been in Anglo culture, is not based on the individual, as though individuals are just the only thing, okay? It respects and loves the individual. You need the individual. Each individual is a unique, unrepeatable, immortal soul, okay? But it's based on the family for society, because we don't just hatch somewhere and go off, okay? We come to life inside a family, and in that family, we learn various things. And that's why it's so important. Well, here's, in 2207, here's an interesting thing. The Catechism ticks off some of the things that the family does for us. It says, I got it all in red. The family is the original cell of social life. It is the natural society in which husband and wife are called to give themselves in love, and in the gift of life. Authority, stability, and a life of relationships within the family constitute the foundations for freedom, security, and fraternity within society. The family is the community in which from childhood one can learn moral values, begin to honor God, and make good use of freedom. Family life is an initiation into life in society. St. John Paul, when he came the first time to America a year after he was elected Pope, came and gave a magnificent speech in the square in front of the mall in front of the Washington Monument. And he said that one of the greatest gifts that you can give children is not so much material things, but even brothers and sisters who teach them how to grow in humanity. And I'll tell you, it's, well, this is the one below that is pretty interesting too, 2212. Through the family, our relationships with our neighbors are recognized as what? As personal in character. The neighbor is not a unit in the human collective. He is someone who by his known origins deserves particular attention and respect. You know, it's interesting, totalitarian governments have always wanted to destroy the family because the family gives a person, a healthy family, a strong family, gives a person roots, it gives a person identity, it gives a person values. You're valued not because you do anything. When you're 1 year old, you can't do it, less than 1 year, you can't do anything, but just because you are. You're part of this, and you're respected, you're loved for that reason. So, you know, they've done a lot of studies. The statistics are all very, very solid on this. So it cuts across all cultures in all countries, but particularly in our country. They've done a lot of study of family breakdown and families in poverty-stricken situations that are not much of families. You know, the various, you know, the fathers take off, the mother is not there that much. The kids are on their own. TV is the mother, and those kids often are very insecure. They don't do well in school. They often join gangs. And on the other hand, the kid who is the good boy, okay, in the bad neighborhood, the one with it doesn't get involved with the dope dealers and with the criminals, is inevitably the one who came from an intact and solid family. It's really the school. It's where the individual can best flourish. And you know, you see the stats are all pretty clear on this too, even though they're kind of scary because our society really doesn't live this way as much anymore, although the church teaches it. But when the family is very fluid, when people are in and out of it, and when there's not this bond or commitment, there's a great deal of insecurity that's involved with a child. When he sees his family blown to smithereens, okay, sometimes they always blame themselves because they wonder, why did this happen? But, you know, they don't really think that life is good. They get scared because they've seen two people that they love pull apart. And it's a hard pill to swallow. And indeed, then the reverse is also true. It doesn't matter if dad loses his job, okay, as far as the kid is concerned. As long as mom and dad are there, and they're there together, and they're working at this together, life is good. Life is good, you know, because at least we've got these people who we support each other, who we're dedicated to, who we're, this crazy word people are like, committed to, okay, but just not because we signed any contract, but just because we are. Just because we are part of this family. There's one last thing I think that we learn in family, and I want to show you a film clip of this that I got up here already. It's forgiveness. Because, you know, when we think about this, I think, okay, gee, I hear all you're saying, Dan, and this is really, you know, beautiful stuff, but I look at myself and I know, hey, you know, I'm no Saint Joseph, okay? And my fiance is no Blessed Virgin Mary. Okay, so you know we're kind of you know, we're not perfect people, and I know I'm not a perfect person. So how are we going to be able to do this? Because I know we're going to screw up. I know I'm going to screw up at some point. Well, you know what? That's where forgiveness comes in. And where's the best place to learn about forgiveness? In the family, because as imperfect people, children of Adam and Eve, with that downward pull that we all have sometimes and that sometimes we give into, we know that sometimes we're going to fail. And when we fail, we need forgiveness. And the opportunity to receive forgiveness and give forgiveness is something that actually strengthens the bonds between us. A number of years ago, actually the play on Broadway that made the star Martin Sheen famous was a play called The Subject Was Roses. And it was a very simple play. It had on Broadway, it won the Tony Award. It had three characters, a husband, a wife, and a son. the son was returning from the war, and he was returning back to, it takes place in New York. It's a Catholic family, by the way. And he goes back to their home, and he says on the way home, "Hey, Dad, why don't you get Mom some roses?" "Roses? Why should I get her any roses? She's going to think something's up." Okay. No, she's not going to think something's up. You just go, you just go buy some roses. Now, the relationship between in this movie, in this play, the husband and wife is pretty strained. I mean, they're together, but it ain't so hot, okay, because different things that have happened over the course of their life together had created scars and big barriers between them. And the kid, the young man played by Martin Sheen when he was young, is the catalyst to the whole thing. So he listens to the kid, he brings flowers, and the woman is just floored because the guy hadn't been anything like this at all for a long time. And but then it comes out, that she's so thrilled about it that he's finally actually embarrassed about it. He said, "Well, I didn't even think about it. The kid, it was his idea. There goes that balloon. Okay, pop. Gone. Okay." And it turns out the flaws of each of these people come out. The father really didn't know how to love. He didn't know how to extend himself in details. He did love his family, he did love his wife, he did love his son, but he wasn't able to show it. He wasn't able to give of himself in that vulnerability where he could actually show that he loved. That was his, and it created a big problem. He's a cold guy, and the warmth that we need, that people need to nurture, okay, and the family wasn't there. Okay. Now the mother knew how to love, okay, but she didn't know how to forgive. And when the guy was finally straightening out, okay, she couldn't forgive him. She couldn't let it go. And as a result, what could have come back together was not able to come back together. And there was a lot in that movie. And so in the catechism, you bring this out. At the back of the page, 22, 27, children in turn contribute to the growth in the holiness of the parents. Each and everyone should be generous and tireless in forgiving one another for offenses, quarrels, injustices, and neglect. Mutual affection suggests this, and the charity of Christ demands it. The sacrifice and effort in details creates strong families, and forgiveness creates strong families, because we all need forgiveness, and we all do things wrong, and we need to be forgiven. That's why I want to show you, to illustrate these points, and illustrate both the strengths and challenges that a family can come. I want to show you a picture from an old movie from World War II, okay, of a Catholic American family who are in a little bit of a jam right now. What had happened was, when the parents weren't home, the kids decided to try some fix-it project on the house, and they screwed everything up, okay? They cut through a pipe, water's all over the place, they sawed a hole in the side of the house, and it's a big problem. And the one guy that was trying to caution them not to do it, he didn't really think it was a good idea, the oldest son, ends up being blamed by the dad wrongly for creating the thing when he was the one guy that didn't have anything to do with it. Okay, so the kid is really burned up, and he's harsh words, very harsh words, even fists put up between him and his dad, and the kid runs away. And as they didn't realize he runs away, but let's see how this family responds to it. I hope this works.
Frank Corner Brothers.
Yes, sir.
True story, by the way.
You'll be back soon enough. Sit down. Well, where do you think you're going?
I don't feel good, Pa. I don't think the child would have taken it into his head to run away.
And if he does, so what?
Well, it's such a cold night. If he tried hopping a freight,
He'll hop no freight. If I know George, he's no further than down the street. Waiting to be coaxed. Well, I'll tell you this. He waited a long time before I coaxed him. 8 o'clock. Wrong time. I'm all out of plug tobacco. I'll just run down the corner here, son.
You children who take the table as soon as you're finished. I've ordered Mrs. Cronin a cup of sugar since goodness knows when. George should come back as soon as in the oven. Jim. Oh, that's plenty. No, you need some rich. I'll go next door. I'll go with you. Who's gonna give Matt and me a hand? All right for you. I guess I'd like to look for him just as much as you. And I'd find him too, so there. Now try something.
He'll come home. By morning, his empty stomach will get the best of his pride. Here, get upstairs, the lot of you. Simply because your brother's behaving like a fool is no reason why you should turn night owls. Go on. Come on, you two. You go to bed.
Good night, boys. Good night, Mom. Well, can I do anything for you, Mom? Oh, no, dear, thanks. But thanks for doing the dishes. Run on upstairs a bit now. Night, Mom. Good night, honey. Good night, Bob.
Good night, Jen.
Oh, my darling. Don't ever do that again. I ain't staying, Mom. Oh, yes, you are. Not after what he done. The only reason I come home, Al told me he was crying.
Now, you listen to me, George Sullivan. He's your father. He's quick-tempered, but he's a fine man, and he's your father. And no matter what happens, you're never to raise your hand to him, because that's a sin.
He hit me, and I didn't do one single thing.
That's his right, George. There's your father. Come on, sit down. I'll be a good boy and tell him you're sorry.
But, Mom.
For Mom's sake, George.
I'm sorry, Pop.
I'm sorry, too. George, you shouldn't lose your temper. Every Irishman sees red once in a while. Robert, give this man some breakfast. A lot of breakfast. Well, I guess that ought to learn us Sullivans to stick together.
Wanted to show that because it's got a lot of the things that we just read in the catechism. It's all there. Okay, here's a family that is going through something that indeed was wrong. Okay, George was wrongly accused of something that he didn't do. The dad made a mistake, and everybody lost the temper. Everybody, harsh words, even again, fists were raised. George is going to run away, but starting even with each member of the family, each person, because they belonged together. They belonged together because they were family. They were the Sullivans. They go out one by one, even the little shaver, even the little tyke. He's the one that finds him, by the way, little Al, goes out and looks for Al one by one. They're all concerned. There's this commitment fostered in the family for each other that's unbreakable no matter what. And finally, when the boy comes back and he, thanks to his mother, who is the catalyst of the heart of the home, as she's showing there, okay, brings them together, smooths it up, brings it back, and the apologies are said and restoration occurs. There's a lot to learn here. If we're going to look at it just on an individual basis, wait, what about my rights? Little George was right. The dad was all wrong about him, but they're willing to swallow the hatchet, swallow the pride, okay, bury the hatchet, so that they can return to this family, this idea that you now are all about, or already in the process of forming. That now with this commitment that you're going to have to each other, bring the children up, having yourselves have a vision, no longer just about me, but about us, that we're in this together. The whole thing is stronger than any one of the individuals would have been by themselves. This is part of the divine mystery that God created us to have children this way, to face the world this way. This is the way it ought to be. This is the way it exists. It's meant to exist. Now, it's a struggle to be able to do it, just like it was a struggle for those families. But to have that struggle ends up perfecting us, helping us to know how to live a life that's truly in love. It doesn't just flare up, when the passions are there and goes away. No, it stays as cooking, as the heating, as the hearth of the home, hearth of the family, till death do us part. I wanted to, if we have time, and it looks like we do have a little bit of time, to take a few minutes to talk about one of the things that can often be a challenge and a risk to the family, and that is the whole question of finances and money. How does this relate? Well, one of the biggest struggles that people often have the pressures that are on the family come from the pressures of money. Okay, like Clarence, George Bailey asked Clarence's angel, if he's got any money. He said, "Oh, we don't have any money in heaven." And George Bailey says, "Comes in pretty handy down here, Bob." Okay, well, and we all realize that. So, but it's all a matter of what kind of attitude should we have with respect to money. And the same themes that we see in what makes a family strong, that the family is complementary. They're not, the husband and wife are not the same. I mean, they're different. They're totally different backgrounds, totally different sexes, totally different mentalities, but they complement each other. But yet there's this unity that's still there. that same principle ought to be applied to the finances. And I found some videos, instructional videos, really meant for marriage preparation, that I thought I would share with you with the minutes that we have left. Because the same thing, though, applies. You do it together. You stick together in this thing. And let's see if I can do it. Okay, it was HD3, right? And there we go. And we, I can't believe we got it. All right. Okay, now how do we start this? This is it, right? There we go. It's gonna play through. It's gonna stop and go, but we'll go through.
So we had this older guy that was doing our photography, and he took us out ahead of time to do these stud lead photos, like Gone with the Wind, you know. Oh, and this is where before the wedding, I was standing outside with my dad and my brothers and my groomsmen, and Anita's dad came over. And I forgot we had this picture. And at that exact moment, he put out his hand and he said, "Huh? Her bills or your bills now?" Shook my hand and walked off. That's one of the few things I still remember very clearly from that day. Made an impression. My dad was a money guy, and he was also very, very quiet. We never talked about money. I just kind of learned by observing. I did learn from my father the importance of saving. And he is not naturally having fun doing the financial stuff, so it was kind of obvious that I'd be the one to do that. What I remember in those conversations, either before we got married or shortly after we got married, was you telling me about how on Saturday night your dad would sit down and write a check to the church, and then he would stick the check in his pocket, shirt pocket, so it would stick out and he wouldn't lose it, and he'd know where it was when the offering came. And you telling me, you know, you essentially said, "So we're going to do that too, right?" And I went, "Well, gosh, I hadn't really thought about that. I know that my parents gave, but I don't know what they gave because we didn't talk about it. So we got to figure that out. Understanding that giving is important to you and saving is important to me. Here's what we're probably going to make. So we got to figure out how to live on that."
And we still have those kind of conversations. This is what we're going to do with this money. And I want to budget this for this. What do you think about that? And that's really helpful. He had this massive baseball card collection, and he sold it to start Syrian's college fund. Do you remember that?
I did.
Yeah. So it was a big sacrifice, but he did that.
It wasn't that big of a sacrifice.
It was.
We had the agreed on goals, and we
But
figured out how to get there.
yes, he saw how to do it, and he just did it.
I think what has helped us the most is having those goals and priorities, and then actually having a budget that we both believed in and lived in has allowed us to attain those financial goals that we wouldn't have otherwise.
I think when we sat down and it was our goals and not just Alan's goals or Anita's goals, that made the difference.
Again, the theme is a unit. You want to be, it's an us doing this together.
Talk to any divorce attorney and they'll likely tell you the same thing. The subject they hear about most often from their clients is money. Disputes over money can erode a marriage quicker than any other topic. So it's important here and now to get clear about money and your family. Honest conversations now can help prevent an expectations gap later. You want to prevent the disappointment, resentment, anger, frustration, and loss of trust that can occur when the two of you hold different expectations about your finances. How do you prevent that expectations gap? Discuss money, how you and your family viewed it and used it, and how you hope to use money in your life together. Remember, everyone thinks how they grew up is normal. We all do that. Like in session 8, we assume that the way life was for us was the same for most of the people around us. It's true for family, and it's also true for money. We tend to associate with people who have about the same amount of money we do. We tend to live around people who have about the same amount of money we do. That leads us to assume that most people have the same habits with money that our family does. However, we rarely know the real financial situations and habits of the people around us. Remember again from session 8, we tend to recreate what we know from our families of origin. In the same way, we often recreate the same kind of spending, saving, and giving habits that we learned in our growing up years. Now, the two of you get to decide what kind of family you want to be and create it. You also get to decide together what will be the financial priorities and habits in your relationship. What role do you want money to play in your family? Everyone thinks how they grew up is normal, and it is normal for you. That's why the first step toward unity and purpose with money is to listen to where your partner comes from in this area. So think about these questions. What was your experience with money like growing up? What were your family's habits around giving, spending, and saving money? And what is your experience with money personally up until now? My father and mother worked very hard. They both loved their work, but they didn't make a lot of money. We lived very simply. My father handled the finances in our family. He was a saver, very careful with money. No fancy vacations, no luxuries, nothing like that. But we always had what we needed. If my brother and I wanted something extra, we learned early on that we would need to earn the money to pay for it ourselves. I think that was good for us. We learned to work hard too. As a result, I think I've learned some of my father's habits. I rarely spend money on anything I would consider extravagant. Expensive things make me uncomfortable. And I like to save so that I know I have a cushion just in case something happens. What about you? What was your experience with money like growing up?
See, these are points for discussion. It's ready to break them up.
There is nothing more powerful than sharing a dream as a couple and then pursuing that dream together. Now that you know each other's money stories, let's dream about what you want your financial story to be as your own family. God has a dream for money. Very simply, God wants you to use money and love people, and never get that backwards. Too often we reverse that principle and we love money and use people. But money is a tool to achieve goals. It's never the goal. God made money so you can use it to love him and to love people. It's that simple. Use money for good, for your needs and the needs of others. Loving money is never an option. In fact, Scripture teaches us that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Money is good only as a tool to love God and to love people. Loving money is such a strong temptation for us that Jesus spent more time talking about money than he did any other topic. More time talking about money than he did talking about heaven, hell, sex, or marriage. Because we humans love stuff. And when you love money and stuff, before long, your stuff owns you more than you own it. And in the end, we can only serve one master. That's why Jesus famously said, no servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon. Mammon is money and stuff, wealth. Jesus is clear. You can't serve God and wealth. No one can serve two masters. Think about it. Would you rather be in a relationship with a generous person or a stingy person? Probably a generous person. Why? Because their generosity spills into everything about them. They like to share. They care about others. They help when somebody's in need. Generosity, kindness, and compassion. Those are all virtues we want in our relationships and in ourselves. Would you rather be in a relationship with someone who wastes money frivolously or with someone who saves and prepares for a rainy day? The latter, probably. Why? Because preparation for hard times gives our lives a sense of stability and security, and we all want that. So as you think about your family, as you dream about your financial life, consider it from the positive perspective first. What are some things or qualities that you definitely want in your family when it comes to money? Perhaps you want a family where you own your own home. Perhaps you want to be sure that you're the spouse who handles the money, perhaps not. Or you might desire to be a family that gives to the church or to help people in need. Maybe you want to be able to afford to have only one of you working full-time so the other can be full-time with your children. Or you might hope to pray together regularly about financial decisions. Then dream about your family's finances from the opposite approach. What are some things or qualities that you definitely do not want in your family when it comes to money? Sometimes we're clearer about that than we are about what we do want. For example, my wife knew for sure that she didn't want to manage our finances. She loathes that area of life, and it was important to her not to have primary responsibility for that. Or maybe you want a home where no one argues about money and how it's spent. Or perhaps you definitely do not want to own your own home because of the pressure that goes with that. Think about it. What are some financial things that you definitely do not want? Storms are coming. Rainy days will arrive. The question is not if they will happen, but when. This is true for various parts of your family and marriage, and it's especially true when it comes to money. Your wife might have her job eliminated. Your husband may be diagnosed with an illness that limits his ability to work and substantially increases your cost of living. Your parents might need assistance as they age, or your children may have special needs that require financial commitment on your family's part. You can't predict what financial surprises, even storms, will come your way, but you can know they will come. When my friend Clark went off to college, he returned home for Thanksgiving his first year. His father looked ashen, as if he were terminally ill and near death. Clark was worried that his father might be dying from cancer and not have told him. When Thanksgiving dinner ended, his father called Clark into a private room in their house and confided in him, "Son, I've lost everything. My business has failed. We have nothing to support you. We can't afford for you to go back to college." Clark was thrilled. He thought his father was dying when only he'd suffered bankruptcy. Clark discovered that he needed to plan to support himself from that point on. Most importantly, Clark also learned to prepare for the storm. Seeing his father in such anguish stirred in Clark a resolve to never be caught without a backup plan or a safety net in his own life. Save now so that you'll be prepared later. The scriptures teach us a lot about preparation. Proverbs teaches us a wise man plans ahead, a fool doesn't and even brags about it. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. The point is obvious. Some will be prepared, some will not. Be one of the prepared ones. Saving 10% of your income from the very first day you're married is a marvelous goal. Perhaps you can start that immediately, or it may take you a year or two to get there. Set a saving goal for the year in January and then have monthly conversations about how you're doing in achieving that goal. Prepare for the storms. Make ready for the rainy day. Life is choices. Being willing to delay gratification now in order to save for a better future will pay off in ways you can never imagine. But we live in a microwave culture. Slow cooking crock pots are frowned on. We want our French fries and we want them fast and now. But slow, steady saving and preparing has real value. Everyday tangible value, peace of mind value. If you saved $1 a day for 55 years, you'd have $20,000 in savings. You might say, so what? Well, if you invested your $30 at the end of each month in government bonds at a return of 5%, after 55 years, you'd have $101,000. Still not convinced that you should delay gratification? Invest your $1 a day at a return of 9%, and after 55 years, you'll have $481,795. Still not convinced? Save an entire $3 a day for 55 years and invest it at 9%, and you'll walk away with $1,445,385. That's right, almost $1.5 million in return for $3 a day of delayed gratification. Now that would provide some peace of mind for you, wouldn't it? How valuable a peace of mind comes from knowing you're prepared for a storm when it arrives. Your family may never need it, but they will thank you for the security and stability they experienced. That peace of mind is far more valuable than a big screen TV ever will be. It sounds backward, but it isn't. Your heart follows your money. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Your heart follows your money, and we usually think it's the other way around. We think that we fall in love with something, and then our money follows it. But the opposite is true. If you want to see what your heart is attached to, take a look at where you spend your money. When I was in high school, I discovered girls and quickly decided I wanted to spend more time with them. That meant I needed a car, but I had no money. So I went to my father and asked him to buy me a car so I could go out with girls. My father laughed in my face. So I got a part-time job working after school at a sporting goods store selling tennis shoes and socks and that kind of stuff. I saved my money, and I saved and I saved and I saved to buy that car. I found an old Volkswagen, beat up, rusty, and ugly, but it ran and I could afford it. So I spent every dollar I had on that car just so I could go out with girls. Wasn't a great car, to be honest. Didn't have air conditioning. It made a lot of noise when it ran, and it had holes in it. Anytime it rained, the rear passenger floorboard filled up with water, which was kind of cool because when a girl was riding in the front passenger side and we stopped at a red light, that water would slide up under the seat and wash her feet. And then when I started up again at the green light, the water would recede back into the rear floorboard and the girl's feet could dry. It's the only car at my high school with a foot washing device. Very cool. But you know what happened after I bought that car? Every Saturday, I'd get up early, wash it, wax it, armor all the dashboard and the tires, Windex the windshield. I spent hours every Saturday morning just taking care of that car. I couldn't spend enough time with my car. I love that car. Why? Because every single penny I had ever made was spent on that car. I was attached to it. Your heart follows your money. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, why does this matter? Because Jesus wants your heart. And if you're not careful, your heart gets attached to stuff. It gets attached to where your money is, because your heart follows your money. And Jesus knows that the greatest competitor he has for your heart is your money, your stuff, because we humans often allow our hearts to get attached to stuff. How do we remedy that problem? With generous giving. Giving frees my heart from the idea that it all belongs to me, when in fact it all belongs to God. Generosity liberates us to care about other people as much as we care about ourselves. Generous giving helps us detach from stuff and attach to God. Again, think about it. Who would you rather be in a relationship with, a generous person or a stingy person? A generous person, right? Because we all like being around people who are generous, who care about other people, who aren't stingy and cheap. I mean, have you ever been around someone who's always keeping score about every penny, every dollar either one of you spends? Always wanting to look for the cheapest option, even when you know it's not going to be any good? That person usually sucks the joy out of every situation. Generosity gives life. Stinginess sucks life. Generosity leads to joy. Stinginess leads to misery, which is where we get the word miser. Have you ever seen a joyful miser? Probably not. Jesus wants your heart. And when you give it to him in your generous giving, you discover the joy of selflessness, the joy of compassion, and the joy of mission. What are your biggest fears around money? Be honest. Very few subjects make us more nervous than talking about money. So be honest. Honesty will serve your marriage well. Maybe you have a lot of credit card debt and you fear that you will never get back to a zero balance. You may fear going bankrupt someday and experiencing that financial distress. Possibly your greatest financial fear is not being able to afford to pay for your kids' education, or not being able to retire because you don't have enough money. You might be afraid of feeling the anxiety and worry that goes with always being behind in your finances. What's your biggest financial fear? The only way to address fear is to know what you're afraid of and develop a plan to face it together. It's important to know that this area of money, love, and marriage is where the better together lessons on dreams and conflict resolution will most often play out in your real life as a couple. Remember the divorce attorney question. What's the topic you hear about the most often from your clients seeking divorce? If the attorney is honest, he or she will respond with, the number one source of conflict I hear is about money. Financial disagreements are not necessarily the largest cause of divorce, but they're usually one of the biggest symptoms. Financial instability destroys families. Lack of a clear financial plan creates constant stress and produces a baseline anxiety, worry, and fear that spill into all the other areas of your life together. The antidote to that anxiety is stability. And the road to stability runs through a budget that you discuss, draft, and agree on together. When you were single, you were lord and master of your budget. You may not even have had one. Now that you're married, there will naturally be two voices speaking to how you use money, how you earn it, spend it, save it, and give it. By definition, your financial life will be more of a negotiation than a one-sided decision. There are good ways and bad ways to approach negotiation, especially when you're negotiating on a delicate subject, money, with someone you love deeply, your spouse. Healthy discussions will make each of you feel safe. You will listen as much as you talk. You will give up the idea of single-handedly maintaining full control of all things financial. Compromise lies at the very center of negotiation. Everyone can't have everything they want. It's true for every family, whether making $10,000 a year or $10 million a day. We are in this together. We will each embody what it means to give and to take. Because in the end, love is not about compromise. Love is about sacrifice. When you're willing to give up something or part of something to help make the whole thing work, then you're loving well. And when you're both willing to give up something to make your dream together a reality, that sacrifice loves most of all.
Okay, this was a little experiment. This is the first time. You guys are the first ones.
You have seen this here at Seminary of the Angels at a PreCana thing, but I thought it was one of the areas that was a little bit missing in the repertoire of stuff that we have here, because it is really part of life. But I wanted to see something that had it with the right attitude. Okay, not just, as he said, to be misers, but to put it in the context of this living as an us, living as a new unit, and also having the proper respect, or the realism, good Catholic realism for the world as it really is, but yet not seeing the world at its worst as being all there is. There's more to it. One of the things that my kids benefited a great deal from is that every one of them actually went on a project to help the poor in other countries. Okay, they spent part of their summer. They go to usually they go to this place way in the mountains of I think it was near Michoacan somewhere. It was such a remote village that people didn't even speak Spanish there. Okay, what they did, they spoke some Indian language. A few people knew Spanish, priests knew Spanish, but the people spoke some kind of native language. And they were literally dirt poor. I mean, the road was dirt, okay, to get there. You had to get to the mountains to get there. And the kids were there. One of my sons, my oldest son, really had a wonderful experience there. They were helping build. They were building like a community center that was attached to the church. And so they were sleeping on the floor of the little school that was attached to the church, and they were helping out. And the people really appreciated it. And this is, again, typical Catholic generosity. One of the villagers was getting married one of the Saturdays that we were there. And they invited all the boys to come to the wedding, okay? And, again, they didn't have 2 pesos to rub together, okay? But yet they were willing to let the kids, these kids that they didn't even know, gringos, okay, come to the wedding. And everybody fit right in. Everybody had a great time. And when my son's last day, and again, this village was very, very remote. One of the men of the village that he was working with told him, he could speak Spanish. I got something for you. And what it turned out, he had walked down the mountain about 5 miles to get a Coca-Cola for my son, because he knew that my son was an American. He figured he probably liked Coca-Cola. They didn't have any stores selling Coca-Cola down there. So he walked down, he got him a Coke, and he brought it back, hey, Coca-Cola. And my son Dan said, you know what? That was one of the greatest gifts I ever had, because generosity. Okay, here this man, appreciated these kids were coming out, doing manual labor, helping out so they could have a community center. And he wanted to show man to man, person to person, that he cared and that it was important and that he was a human being. And something very important, as fellow Catholics, they were all in this together. They're part of that family that we belong to, that we're meant to belong to, because we're all children of the same Father. We're all brothers of the same God-man. It brings us together, and we have in common with each other, whether they speak, I forget what the name of the language was, Quechua or something like that, or whether they speak English or even British English. If we're truly following the same leader, if we're truly committed to the same thing, there's a bond between us. The church is modeled after a family. It's truly the family of God, where God's mother becomes our mother. He gives her to us. God's friends become our friends. We belong with them. They belong to us. That's meant to be lived by us, and we need it. Okay, in a society, it's splitting apart like an atom bomb, with fission. Everybody's going in their own different directions. I'll tell you a sad story about that. Very sad. My favorite uncle as a kid ended up, his wife died. My aunt, okay, my blood aunt died, and she left behind a couple of kids. Well, after a little while, he met someone. He met a widow whose husband had also died, cancer too, and she had 3 kids. Okay, they made themselves a regular Brady Bunch. Okay, they put the families together, and they had all gone through, you know, the sadness of seeing the loss of a beloved parent. But they put the families together, and they made a go of it. Well, unfortunately, my uncle decided, you know, when he was about 50 or so, to wander away. Okay, to get something going with you know, somebody that he met. He picked up at you know, some golf outing somewhere. Okay, and there had been 5 people living together. Okay, but from the time after he committed this adultery, boom. Okay, every single one, 7 people have been living together, 2 adults and the other young kids, teenagers and so forth. Within a year, they were all gone. They were all in different places, and they were all embittered. Now, interesting thing about it is, and this is a miracle. He ultimately came back to his senses. You know, a miracle of miracles. She took him back. Okay, and guess what? The family came back together. I mean, you know, so I mean, this is an outrageous example. I mean, you know, it blows my mind, to tell you the truth. Okay, I tried to talk him into coming back to his wife when he was still hot for this skirt that he was chasing, but I didn't succeed. Okay, but later on, a number of years later, okay, the guy came back. We go back to the goal that God really has for it, that he wants to give you and he wants to give me. We have an opportunity in living family to not only live together, but to thrive together, to give of ourselves together, to have a place where we are able to express and give love. And in doing that, we not only build up ourselves, we build up those we love, and we build up the world in which we live. Because where people are being raised, as we saw before, in an environment where they believe in the family, where they stick together, like the Sullivans, we Sullivans got to stick together. Well, then all of a sudden, people grow up with that security, and they can go out and do the things. They can thrive. They think that they are somebody. It broke my heart. There was a famous politician, Teddy Kennedy, okay, who was married to a originally striking blonde, okay, Joan Kennedy. And Teddy, because of his wildness, you know, literally drove her to drink, okay, and she had a serious alcohol problem, and they split up. And it ended up that she went to a college. She got an advanced degree. That she went to a college that actually was right across the street from Harvard Law School, where it was. And there was an interview that was published in the college newspaper with her, and it kind of broke my heart, because it said, you know, when you're a young girl growing up, you think you're somebody, and then when you read in the newspapers, you find out from the newspapers or radio that your husband's all over the place with other women. It really makes you feel like a nothing, and it was just too much for me to take, and I turned to drink. Okay, I had this problem. I felt bad. You know, my heart went out to her. I felt bad, because everybody is somebody's sister. Everybody is somebody's daughter, and we want to be able to grow and help others grow in an environment where nobody's a nobody and everybody's somebody. And you're able to be that if you learned that in the family, where people are valued just because you belong together. So once again, as I said in the beginning when you came here, what you're involved in here, in getting ready to walk down the aisle, is not a little thing. It's a great thing. It's a big thing. It's a wonderful adventure. It does a lot of good if you actually live this vocation, the family life, where we love and are loved. We forgive and are forgiven. We have people depending on us, and we fulfill the needs of others in countless ways over the long haul. In for the long game is hard. It's difficult. Sometimes you want to run away, but it is indeed a great, great adventure. And I compliment you for undertaking this adventure. we'll do everything we can to help you do this, because what you're truly in is not only a great adventure, but a great vocation, something that not only helps you, but it helps the entire world. So, any questions? No? All right, next week, let me tell you what's going on next week. Now, I won't be here next week, okay? Because my wife is coming back from one of our daughters just had a baby. My wife was out there helping, and I'm going to pick her up. But we're going to have something very special for you. First, Father John is going to talk about moral life, Catholic moral life in marriage, okay? And then we're going to have an expert come in on relationships, a relationship specialist, a guy who is a marriage counselor whose whole job is to try to keep marriages together, and who's also written and been a lot on the radio, the practices people can have to build communication, to be able to, we all have our good days and our bad days, days where we're on top of our game and days we're on the bottom, okay? But he has insights as to what are the things we can do, what are the things we can learn, so that we can indeed not only stick together, but stick together in love and in romance. So, I won't see you next week, but I'll be back in 2 weeks with that. And I hope everything goes well. And again, make sure you check and sign in so they know that you're here. Make sure you correct any mistakes that are there. Is Carl here? Is Carl Sokolowski? No. Anyway, I don't seem to have his right email address because that keeps bouncing back. But and then in there, if you've paid or not, if you paid and it marks that you didn't pay, send me an email and we'll work it out. So again, thanks very much, and I'll see you. You guys see each other in a week. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.